Well, folks, I am here with Caitlin Starling. She's a writer of horror-tinged speculative fiction of all flavors. Her first novel, The Luminous Dead, came out last year from Harper Voyager and has been nominated for the Bram Stoker Award for Superior Achievement in a First Novel. She has two gothic horror tales forthcoming, Yellow Jasmine, a novella from Neon Hemlock, and The Death of Jane Lawrence, a novel from St. Martin's Press, as well as a novella in the upcoming Vampire the Masquerade audio collection, Walk Among Us. Caitlin also works in narrative design for interactive theater and games and has been paid to design body parts. Hi, Caitlin. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Where are you coming from? Where's your home base right now?
Just outside of Portland, Oregon.
Ah, so you're up in close to ground zero with the virus.
Yeah, a little bit. So far, Oregon isn't hit too hard, but of course we're waiting to see what happens.
So that's what we want to start with. I mean, let's just talk about in your town of Portland. What are the restrictions? What are you able to do? Come and go freely? Are you asked to stay at home? Is it hard to get supplies? What's going on in your life because of these restrictions?
Yeah, we're on lockdown aside from essential businesses. My day job is in fact considered an essential service, but I'm luckily able to do my job from home. But it's a manufacturing plant, so I've heard that we are doing some very exciting things to try and make sure that the employees are social distancing while also still being able to get product out. So I'm sure that must be really fun. I have not been to the store recently. I do know that the state liquor stores are on different schedules now to try and spread out when people are coming in. We don't officially have blue laws where we're closed on Sundays, but a lot of them are, and they are currently not closed on Sundays, so they can offer a couple hours a day throughout the week. Grocery stores, hit or miss, pretty much all pre-scheduled grocery delivery stuff is all booked out for the next forever. So, but other than that, we're doing pretty well out here. People seem to be following the instructions, at least in the Portland area. Don't know much about the rural part of the country or of the state, but we'll see.
So do you get a little stir crazy? I mean, do you get outside to go for walks? Do you have any pets you have to take care of, or how do you stop from kind of getting cabin fever?
So I have two cats, which doesn't really help because they're trapped in here with me all the time. So
Yeah.
I don't get to take them for walks or anything. I do have to take a walk to get the mail, which I, of course, then have to put in a nice place to quarantine for a day or two and go wash my hands. Every so often I take a walk, although everybody else is also taking walks. So it can be a bit crowded. I kind of have to time it for when people don't want to take walks, like bad weather and things like that. And occasionally, like I'll walk to the grocery store or the liquor store, whichever. But so I have
I found with some of our fellow horror writers that, funnily enough, being in your sort of your home writing office and not seeing people for days on end is somewhat not that unusual for us. Obviously, you've got a day job. You know, a lot of writers, just write. So you are used to going out of your home and coming back and getting into your headspace to do your writing and get your creative side going. So how has this affected your productivity? You've got a couple of novels and novellas in the works. So how's that affected that side of you?
So everything that has an official deadline, I have been doing absolutely fine on, because with a deadline, I'm able to, stay motivated and work a little bit every day. For the projects I have that are not announced yet because they're in early stages, it has been much more difficult to motivate to actually sit down and work on them. It's kind of surprising also that with the lockdown, my day job is actually busier now. Because we're a factory that's still open, we're taking on additional orders, emergency orders from other people. So my job is pricing. And since we are now doing emergency orders for people, we have to generate all this emergency pricing. So, where I used to have time in my day job or on my commute to let things kind of roll over in the back of my head, right now I don't really have that. So I'm spending a lot of my downtime watching TV or playing video games or knitting or some other thing that's not creative, and I'm sort of just waiting for the bug to bite me again.
Do you get back into that?
It's not really a great turn of phrase for that right now.
Yeah, that's true. We don't want to get any bugs
Yep.
either inhaled or biting us. But I guess one of the things to compare with some of the other folks I've done the interviews with, when they try to sit down at their computer, they're still distracted by, what's going on
Yeah.
around them, what's going on in the world, both economically as well as from a health standpoint, what's happening in other countries, is it getting closer to us? And it's been difficult for some people to actually get into that wonderful place that we get into when we want to write and create.
Yeah. I feel like if I do the work to sit down and kick something off, it'll be a nice refuge that I can go to reliably. But it's that I'm at that stage where I'm turning in edits and copy edits and proof pages for everything. And so once I turn those in, it's like, okay, well, what now?
Yeah.
And I had several things in the works, but then they all sold at once, and now they're almost all finished. So I now have to put in the work to start something new, and that starting something new seems almost impossible.
Well, let's talk about the first novel, the Luminous Dead, and congratulations, by the way, for being nominated for superior achievement in first novel. Give us some of the backstory. Where was your inspiration for this? Give us a little bit about the story, obviously without spoiling it for us. But tell us about how this came to be and how it became, award, Stoker Award nominee.
Yeah, so it is my first published novel, but it's not the first novel-length thing that I've written, which is, I would say, probably true of 99% of people who get a book published. I spent most of my high school years writing pretty much constantly. Then in college went, well, that's not a reasonable career path. So I'm going to stop doing that. And I kept writing on the side, but it was things like fan fiction and sort of low stakes, didn't feel like it was real, wasn't for the rest of my life sort of thing. But I kept getting better at writing by doing that. And eventually, after college, a couple years into working at a law firm at that time, I was like, I wonder if I could still write something totally original that is all me, nothing else. And so this came out of that. I used NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, to write the first draft, and then realized with a lot of sudden terror that it was good. So then I needed to actually make it better so I could try to sell it. And then I had to figure out how that all worked. Um, and I was lucky enough I found an agent cold querying, just going through slush piles, and she sold it to Harper Voyager. And here we are a couple years later, and it's nominated, which blows my mind. But
Well, that's great. I mean,
yeah,
congratulations. Give us a little idea on the storyline.
yeah. So The Luminous Dead is about a caver named Gyre on a colony world that's very economically disadvantaged, very sort of gold rush towny. And one of the only lucrative avenues for work on this planet is cave exploration. But the reason why it's so well paid is, of course, on the one hand, there's very, very important minerals down there that all the companies want to take out. But there's also something down there that kills people when they go exploring. So they found out over the last several decades that you definitely can't go in a group. You can't seem to have a lot of light or like an open fire, and they're not quite sure what's causing this thing to attack, and they don't know what it is. So at the point of the book, they have developed this technology that is basically an enclosed suit with no access to the outside world, no light. It uses sonar in order to render the environment that our character sees. She has a feeding tube, she has a colostomy. She's going to stay in there for weeks on end in this suit, but the suit also keeps her safe. Like if she hurts herself, it can turn into like a splint. It has good things to it as well. It can also augment her strength to be able to do all this caving alone, because it turns out in real life you should never go technical caving alone. Don't do that. It's very dangerous. Um, but so while she's down there alone, though, she actually is in constant contact with the surface, and she's expecting to have a full team supporting her, kind of watching her back while she's sleeping, all this stuff. And it turns out she only has one woman up there, and that woman has brought her there under false pretenses, and it becomes quickly obvious that both of them are lying to each other quite extensively. And so the book follows Gyre as she's trying to navigate this underground system and also confronting a lot of her own ghosts, a lot of this woman on her radio's ghosts, and some of those ghosts might be literal, possibly.
Ooh.
But
Good.
it's it's equal parts sci-fi sports adventure because there's a lot of caving and climbing stuff in there, as well as a very in-depth character study because you only have these two characters, and so the book is a lot about their relationship with one another and how they both set each other off but also improve on each other on some occasions.
Well, I understand a little bit about caving. I can't do it because I'm claustrophobic, but I do have a couple of friends in Tennessee that do it. And I understand it's highly technical stuff. So how did you get your knowledge base to write a novel in doing something? Is that something you did, or were you a caver yourself?
No, I do rock climbing sometimes, so I have a passing familiarity with just general climbing equipment. Of course, it's much more specialized for caving, and I hit upon using that what little climbing knowledge I had at the time in the setting of a cave because it's so claustrophobic, because it was an easy to me way to isolate this main character on her own and to give her lots of physical as well as psychological challenges. So then I just started doing a lot of research. I read a couple books that were really helpful. One is called Beyond the Deep, and it's about the 1994 expedition to Sistema Hualta in Mexico, and that was at the time one of the deepest caves in the world, and was where they were pioneering rebreather systems for cave diving instead of having to lug scuba tanks with them. But so they had this one guy, Bill Stone, in his garage was building these highly complex computerized gas exchange systems that eventually the Navy started using. So, but no one trusted them at the time, and of course somebody wound up dead, and there's this whole drama about that. And there's another one called Blind Descent, covers that expedition. Another cave called Cheve Cave, and then Krubera Cave over in the country of Georgia, and sort of how the Soviet and post-Soviet approach to caving was different than the American approach to caving, and all that fun stuff. And then this book came out after I wrote the book and after it was published, but it turns out I really wish it had existed before because it's perfect. If anyone really wants to know what it's like to be cave diving, there's a book called Into the Planet by Jill Heinerth, and that book is amazing.
Well, before I forget to ask, do you have a personal website where we can direct people listening to this interview to come to learn more about not only the Luminous Dead, but your other books and yourself?
Yeah, it is just myname.com. So it's Caitlin, Caitlin, Starling.com. You can find links to upcoming books, the one existing book that I have, the work I did on a stage show, on a theater show called A Human, which is where I designed the body parts, and as well as we have a knit along for any knitters in your audience in support of one of my novellas that's coming out this year.
Cool. I was going to get to the designing body parts because that sounds cool, especially for a horror writer. How did that come about? Have you got an extensive knowledge of anatomy, or is it all theatrical, or a little bit of both?
It was all theatrical. So, and I was not the art director on that. It was it was a collaborative effort. I was contacted to be the narrative designer for A Human, which was a sort of interactive theater fake store installation in New York for a month back in 2018. And it was a store that sold body parts. And they brought me on because they didn't want it to be horror. But it's a very hard, fine line to walk when you're talking about, having purchasable body parts. And so I was able sort of to figure out when it was getting too much for the majority of people. We ended up doing it very much like a Apple store meets a spa, as opposed to like Walmart or something like Repo the Genetic Opera, which the people I was working with had never seen these things, and so they didn't know like that there were already rails to sort of avoid if you don't want to evoke these particular associations with people. So, but in the course of that, I was basically coming up with the backstory of the store and of some of the characters, and just coming up sort of with this whole world that we could pull little details from. And I was also writing the marketing copy for all of these body parts. So I was working with our art team and our design team and our actual fabrication team, which was, we were working with Laura Dandridge, she was on Sci-Fi's Face Off. No, yes, Face Off, the special effects makeup competition. We got her to build all these really cool silicon sculptures that looked completely lifelike, and we actually had some models also in the store, and you couldn't always tell the difference between what was a sculpture and what was a person with lots of makeup on. But
Oh,
we all worked together to come up with what would be the most interesting products that, and this is what we hit on as the major thing to avoid, that didn't play on people's insecurities. So we're not saying, okay, here you can get, a bigger bust line, you can make your waist really skinny. You're like, so how about, do you want fins? Do you want ruffs of skin, like a Tudor collar around your neck? And we just had a lot of fun with it and tried to stay away from practicality stuff, because that gets into weird places for people, very personal places, which is great for horror, but not so great for just a really cool store.
Caitlin, let's talk about get back to isolation for a moment, since that's what we're all dealing with in varying degrees
Yeah.
around the country. It's amazing how some of, again, our fellow horror writers have found silver linings, things they didn't realize existed in their life or in their relationships when they get in close quarters. Is there any silver lining, anything positive in your life that's come out of in this isolation that you've had to be dealing with?
I mean, I enjoy not having to commute every day. That saves me a little bit of time. Pretty much my life is, if it feels normal, completely abnormally normal. Like, it doesn't, I have days where I feel like this must be something I made up, that it's not really happening, that it's just something my anxious brain has conjured. And then there are other days where I'm like, oh, this is really happening. And it, suddenly just terrifying. But I have noticed people are now recommending my book as like, look, the character can't touch her face in this. Bonus, no face touching content. Or if you want severe social isolation, read this book. Social distancing, which is
Sure.
an interesting side effect that I was not anticipating.
Well, there you go. Now, you realize, and I'm sure you do, but just to repeat it for the listeners here and viewers, that the Stoker Awards will be streamed live,
Mm-hmm.
and we wish you good luck. Hopefully, you'll get to not only hold up your copy of the book again, but also a Bram Stoker Award. So I congratulate you once again, and sorry that you won't be able to go to Scarborough and do this in person, but we just all have to make do.
I'm
And
still going to
and
dress up
best.
in my fanciest dress and have some
There
champagne,
you go.
regardless. So,
Well, stay safe out there, and thank you for taking your time to do this interview. And good luck, as I said.
thanks.